David sat at his small kitchen table, the morning sunlight spilling across the worn wooden surface. When he noticed the ivory envelope tucked among his usual mail bills, advertisements and a few letters from old friends, the envelope was heavy, its edges trimmed with gold. His heart skipped a beat as he recognized the name printed in elegant cursive, Emily Grace Carter. His daughter, he hadn't seen that name written out so formally since she'd graduated college. For a moment, his rough, grease-stained hands hesitated to open it. It felt strange, foreign to receive something from his own daughter that looked more like an announcement for a stranger. Still, he carefully slid a finger under the flap and pulled out the thick card inside. It was a wedding invitation. You are cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of Emily Grace Carter and Ryan Bennett. No, dear Dad. No personal note. No warm line at the bottom saying, "Can't wait to see you there, love." Emily, just the cold perfection of embossed letters and flawless design. David stared at it for a long moment. His chest tightened as he tried to take in the reality his little girl getting married, and he'd found out the same way a distant relative might. He could almost hear his late wife, Sarah, whispering in his ear, "She's still our girl, David. Don't give up on her." But it wasn't easy. It in 5 years since Sarah's death. 5 long, aching years since the accident that shattered their family. Emily had been in college then, bright, ambitious, full of dreams. After her mother's funeral, she'd pulled away. She'd blamed David for working too much, for not being there, for not saving her mother. Her grief had turned into bitterness, and one day she just stopped coming home. He tried calling, texting, even visiting her campus once. Each attempt ended with short replies or silence. Eventually, David told himself to let her go, to give her space. But the truth was, he never stopped hoping that one day she'd come back, and now she had. Through a piece of paper, he read the details again. Saturday, June 12th, at the Willow Creek Country Club, a fancy place, far from anything David had ever known. He imagined it full of glass chandeliers, white roses, and champagne flutes that cost more than his weekly groceries. He looked around his small home, the faded curtains, the old photos of family vacations, Sarah's painting still hanging crooked on the wall. Everything in this house held memories of love and laughter. Everything except the empty chair at the table where Emily used to sit, feet swinging as she'd tell him about her day. David sighed, setting the invitation down. Part of him thought maybe she didn't really want him there. Maybe it was sent out of obligation, something her fiancé's family insisted on. But still, a voice inside him whispered, "You have to go, not to make a scene, not to demand anything, but because he needed to see her happy. He needed to see for himself that his daughter had built a life worth." Smiling about, he took the invitation and pinned it to the fridge with a small magnet, shaped like a heart, a gift Emily had made for him in 2nd grade. The chipped paint on it read, "Number 1, Dad." That night he sat in his recliner, holding a photo of Emily and Sarah at the beach. Emily was about 8 then, with wild curls and a grin so wide it could light up the whole sky. Sarah had her arms around both of them, the three of them framed by waves and sunlight. David whispered to the picture, "She's getting married, Sarah. You'd be proud of her. I just wish she still saw me as her dad." Then, with quiet determination, he decided he would go to that wedding even if no one wanted him there, because sometimes love means showing up, even when you're not invited. With a smile, the drive to the wedding rehearsal took David nearly 2 hours, but it felt longer. His old blue pickup truck rattled over every bump in the road, the same truck he'd driven Emily to school in when she was a little girl. Back then, she used to sit in the passenger seat, singing along to country songs and rolling the window down to let the wind tangle her hair. Now that seat felt painfully empty. He'd taken extra care getting ready, freshly shaved, a clean shirt, and his best pair of slacks, though the collar was a bit frayed. He'd even polished his old boots. He wasn't fancy, but he wanted to look respectable, especially for Emily. When he finally turned into the elegant driveway of Willow Creek Country Club, he hesitated. The place looked like something out of a magazine. Rolling green lawns, a sparkling lake, and white columns that framed the grand entrance. Expensive cars lined the parking lot, sleek sedans, luxury SUVs. Not a single vehicle that looked like his rusted pickup. David parked at the far end, away from the rest. He sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm the pounding in his chest. "It's just a rehearsal," he muttered to himself. "You're her father. You belong here." Inside, the lobby gleamed with crystal chandeliers and marble floors that echoed every step. David spotted a group of people gathered near the ballroom. Emily in the center, radiant in a pale pink dress. She looked beautiful, grown, and happy. For a second, pride swelled in his chest. Then she saw him. The smile faded from her face. "Dad?" she said, her voice uncertain, her eyes darting toward the others. David gave a small, nervous wave. "Hey, sweetheart. Thought I'd come early, see if you needed a hand." Before Emily could reply, a tall man in a sharp gray suit stepped forward. Ryan, the fiancé. His expression was polite but tight. "Ah, Mr. Carter," he said, extending his hand with a firmness that felt like a warning. "Didn't realize you were coming tonight." David shook his hand anyway. "Didn't want to miss the chance to see my daughter before the big day." Ryan's mother, a woman draped in pearls and perfume, leaned toward Emily and whispered loudly enough for David to hear, "You didn't tell us your father was attending." Her eyes flicked over his clothes with a faint wrinkle of disapproval. Emily shifted uncomfortably. "He's just here for the rehearsal," she said quickly, her tone clipped. David's stomach sank. She wasn't angry exactly, but she was embarrassed. The realization hit him like a cold wind throughout the evening. He tried to help, offering to move chairs, fetch bottled water, anything to stay useful. But Ryan brushed him off each time. "We've got it covered," he'd say with a tight smile. "Wouldn't want you to tire yourself out." During dinner, David sat at the far end of the table. The conversation buzzed with talk of careers, vacations, and wine pairings. No one asked him a thing. He listened quietly, poking at his plate. When one of Ryan's groomsmen joked about blue-collar folks crashing fancy parties, laughter rippled around the table. David pretended not to notice, but Emily did. She said nothing. As the evening wound down, David caught Emily alone by the doorway. "You look beautiful, kiddo," he said softly. "Your mom would be so proud." She forced a smile, her eyes darting away. "Thanks, Dad. It's just a lot going on right now. Maybe tomorrow we'll talk, okay?" He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Sure, tomorrow." But as he walked out to his truck, the laughter from inside followed him into the night, sharp, distant, and cold. He looked back once at the glowing windows of the country club, where his daughter stood among her new family, shining like she belonged to another world. David started the engine and whispered to himself, "Just be happy for her. That's all that matters." He didn't know that tomorrow would break his heart in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The morning of the wedding rehearsal dinner had left David uneasy, but he tried to shake it off as he drove to the ceremony the next day. He told himself he was overthinking things, that Emily was just nervous, that tomorrow she'd smile at him like she used to. He stopped by a florist on the way and bought a small bouquet of white Lilith Era's favorite flowers. He planned to give them to Emily before the ceremony, a quiet reminder that her mother's love was still with them. As he drove, he practiced what he might say. Nothing long, nothing emotional, just a few words to let his daughter know he was proud. When he arrived at the venue, the staff were already bustling about, arranging decorations, stringing lights, and fluffing bouquets twice the size of the one he carried. Everything shimmered with perfection: white roses, crystal vases, gold accents. It was beautiful but sterile, like something copied from a magazine. David walked up to the coordinator, a brisk young woman with a clipboard. "Excuse me, I'm the bride's father," he said. "Could you tell me where Emily might be?" She blinked, looking him up and down before forcing a polite smile. "Of course, sir. She's in the bridal suite. But she's, quite busy. Maybe you can wait outside for a bit?" David nodded, used to being overlooked. He found a quiet spot near the garden arch and sat on a bench, waiting. The laughter and chatter coming from inside stung a little. He could hear Emily's voice now and then, light and excited. It made him smile, even from afar. Then Ryan appeared. Dressed in a tailored suit, sunglasses perched on his head. He spotted David and approached with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Carter," he said smoothly, hands in his pockets. "Didn't expect you here this early." David stood, brushing imaginary dust from his jacket. "Just wanted to see Emily, wish her well before the big moment." Ryan's lips tightened. "I think she's got enough on her plate right now. You know how brides get. Nervous, distracted. We don't want her upset before the ceremony, right?" David frowned slightly. "I don't think seeing her dad would upset her." Ryan gave a small, condescending laugh. "Sure, but no offense, this whole thing is kind of a different crowd. You know what I mean?" David's brows knit together. "I'm not sure I do." Ryan stepped a bit closer, lowering his voice. "Look, Emily told me a bit about you. The garage, the money problems after her mom passed. It's admirable, really, that you work so hard. But today's about image, you know? Press, sponsors, my family's business connections. We just want everything to look polished." The words landed like a punch. "So you're saying I don't fit in?" David said quietly. Ryan shrugged. "I'm saying let's not make things awkward. Maybe hang back a little, keep things simple. It'll mean a lot to Emily if everything goes smoothly." David took a deep breath. He wanted to tell Ryan what he really thought, that money and image meant nothing compared to love, that no amount of polish could hide a man's character. But he swallowed the anger. This was Emily's day. He wouldn't cause a scene. "All right," he said finally. "If that's what'll make her happy." Ryan smiled, satisfied. "Good man." He clapped David on the shoulder and walked away. Leaving the faint smell of expensive cologne behind, David sat back on the bench, his heart heavy. He pulled the small bouquet closer to his chest and whispered, "Sarah, I wish you were here." "You'd know what to say." A few minutes later, the coordinator returned, her expression awkward. "Mr. Carter, the bride asked if you could take a seat in the back row for the ceremony. The front's reserved for immediate family." David nodded slowly. "Of course." He didn't argue, didn't protest. But deep down, something inside him cracked out. The wedding hadn't even begun, and already he could feel the distance between him and his daughter turning into a wall too. High to climb. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of golden sunlight that promised perfection. For most people, it was a day of joy and celebration. For David, it was a day of quiet nerves and bittersweet reflection. He woke before dawn, unable to sleep. His small kitchen was still and silent as he brewed coffee and stared at the wedding invitation pinned to his fridge. The gold lettering glinted softly under the light. The same invitation that had started all of this, a piece of paper that both connected him to and reminded him how far apart he and Emily had become. On the table, beside his mug, lay a small velvet box. He reached for it gently, opening it as if it were something fragile, alive. Inside, nestled in soft white fabric, gleamed a delicate diamond ring. The gold was a little worn, but the stone still caught the light in a way that made it seem almost magical. It was Sarah's engagement ring, the one David had saved for months to buy. Long before they had anything to their names, Sarah had worn it every day until the day she died. After that, David kept it safe in a small wooden box in his desk drawer, waiting for the right moment to pass it on. "This was always meant for her," he whispered softly, tracing the edge of the diamond. "Our Emily." He placed the box in his coat pocket, careful and reverent. He wasn't sure how Emily would react. She might refuse it, might even be too busy to notice, but he needed to try. This was his last link to the woman they both loved, and he wanted his daughter to have it as a blessing. A bridge between what was lost and what still remained. By 10 o'clock, the country club was alive with activity. Cars rolled up one after another. Guests dressed in shimmering dresses and dark suits stepped out, laughing and greeting each other. Cameramen darted about, snapping pictures of the lavish decorations, rows of white roses, crystal chandeliers hanging from the tent ceiling. A string quartet playing softly in the background. David arrived quietly, parking again in the far corner, as if instinct told him he didn't belong among the polished chrome and designer smiles. He adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror, the same navy tie he'd worn to Sarah's funeral, and took a deep breath, He carried the lila and the ring box with him as he made his way inside. The air smelled of perfume, champagne, and polished wood. Everywhere he looked, people seemed to belong except him. He spotted Emily near the dressing area, surrounded by her bridesmaids. Her hair was pinned perfectly, her makeup soft and glowing. She looked radiant. For a second, David's heart swelled with pride. He said softly as he approached. She turned, her face lighting up in surprise. Dad, you're here early. I just wanted to see you before everything starts, he said, holding out the lila. These were your mom's favorite. I thought maybe you'd want them somewhere near you today. Emily hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. A makeup artist froze mid-stroke, and one of the bridesmaids murmured something under her breath. Emily's smile faltered, her voice dropping. That's really sweet, Dad, but we already have the flowers arranged. You can give them to the coordinator. David nodded, trying not to show the sting. Of course. I also have something for you. He pulled the small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. The light caught the ring perfectly. And for a second, Emily's eyes softened. Mom's ring, she whispered. She'd have wanted you to have it, David said, his voice thick. It's not much, but before he could finish, Ryan walked in, sharp as ever in his tailored suit. Everything okay here? He asked, his tone casual but edged. His eyes fell on the ring. Oh, that's quaint. Emily straightened immediately, her warmth evaporating. We should probably get going, she said quickly. The photographer's waiting. David closed the box slowly. Of course, sweetheart. I'll see you inside. As he walked away, he didn't notice Ryan lean close to Emily and murmur, You really want that old thing near your new ring? It doesn't exactly fit the image. Emily hesitated, looking down at her mother's ring in her hand. For a brief, trembling moment, guilt flickered across her face. But then she set the box aside on the dressing table and turned back to the mirror. Outside, David took a seat in the back row, clutching his hat in his lap. He told himself it didn't matter if she accepted the ring or not. He was here, that was what mattered. But deep down, something inside him whispered that today wasn't going to end the way he hoped. The ceremony was set beneath a grand white arch, framed by a lake that shimmered like glass in the afternoon sun. Everything looked perfect, too perfect, David thought, like something crafted for photographs instead of memories. Guests took their seats, murmuring in excitement. Laughter and soft music drifted through the air. David sat quietly in the very last row, hands folded over his knees, his hat resting beside him. He could see Emily at the altar from where he sat, a vision in lace and pearls, her smile dazzling. He couldn't help it. His heart swelled with pride, and for a moment all the hurt faded. That was still his little girl up there, the same one who used to dance barefoot in the yard and beg him to twirl her one more time, when the officiant began the vows. David leaned forward, tears prickling in his eyes. Emily's voice trembled slightly when she said, I do, and he smiled, whispering under his breath, That's my girl. But even as joy filled him, he couldn't ignore the sideways glances from the front rows, Ryan's family whispering among themselves. A few guests craning their necks to see who the man in the back was. One of Ryan's groomsmen chuckled quietly, nudging another and muttering something that made them both laugh. David couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. He'd heard that kind of laughter all his life after the ceremony. Everyone moved toward the reception hall, a glittering room draped in gold and white. Waiters passed champagne flutes, and music floated through the air. David lingered near the doorway, unsure where to stand. When he spotted Emily and Ryan near the head table, he decided to try once more to give her the ring, properly this time. He slipped the velvet box from his pocket and approached slowly, careful not to interrupt anyone. Emily, he said softly, smiling, just wanted to give you this before the party gets too busy. She turned, startled, and Ryan's mother immediately frowned. Who is this? She asked sharply, though she already knew. This is my father, Emily said, her tone strained. Oh, the woman said, her lips curling slightly. Of course. I didn't recognize you, Mr. Carter. Her eyes swept over his modest suit and worn shoes. How nice of you to come. David ignored the sting and held out the box. This belonged to your mother, he said. She'd have wanted you to have it. Emily hesitated, clearly torn. Ryan stepped in smoothly, his voice dripping with false warmth. That's very touching, he said, but maybe this isn't the right time. We don't want to lose it or… It's okay, David interrupted gently. It's just a small gift from her, old man. A few nearby guests had turned to watch. David could feel their eyes on him, their curiosity, their amusement. Ryan's smirk deepened, and his mother whispered something that made Emily flush with embarrassment. Dad. Please, Emily said under her breath. Not now. He blinked. I just wanted… Ryan gave a short laugh. I think we've got it from here, sir. Why don't you relax? Maybe enjoy the buffet in the back? David felt heat rise in his face. The room seemed to shrink, the music dimming behind the sound of his pounding heart. He looked at Emily, his daughter, and saw only discomfort in her eyes. I didn't mean to embarrass you, he said quietly. You're not just… Maybe go, okay? I'll talk to you later. Her words came out in a whisper, trembling but firm. Ryan's mother stepped closer, her tone cold. Security? She called softly to a nearby attendant. Can we help Mr. Carter find his way out? A hush fell over the nearest tables. David froze. Emily looked around, mortified. Mom, no, just… Please go, Dad, please. The words hit harder than any shout could. David nodded slowly, eyes glistening. He placed the velvet box on the nearest table, beside the untouched wedding cake, and said softly, Congratulations, sweetheart. Your mom would have been proud. Then he turned and walked out. No one stopped him. No one called after him, outside. The laughter and music from the hall spilled faintly into the night air, cruel and distant. David sat in his truck for a long while, staring at the ring box through the window until the lights blurred into nothing. Finally, he started the engine and drove away, the sound of the celebration fading behind him, inside the hall. The party went on until the whispers began. The music was still playing when David's truck rumbled down the long driveway, headlights fading into the distance. Inside the glittering reception hall, laughter and champagne flowed freely. But a subtle unease had begun to creep through the crowd like a chill draft. No one wanted to admit feeling that it had all happened so quickly. One moment, Emily was a glowing bride surrounded by applause and cameras. The next, she was standing frozen in front of her father as he was quietly escorted out. Guests had seen it. Phones had caught glimpses. Whispers had spread faster than the waiters could refill glasses. Ryan's mother leaned toward her son, her pearls glinting in the soft light. Well, that was unpleasant, she murmured. At least it's over. Ryan smirked. He shouldn't have shown up like that. The man looked like he'd wandered in from a junkyard. Emily didn't respond. She just stared at the table where her father had left the small velvet box. It sat there, unopened, its dark fabric faintly catching the glow of the candles. Every so often her eyes flicked toward it, as though it were a living thing, silently accusing her. A bridesmaid tried to lighten the mood. Don't worry about it, Em, she whispered. It's your day. Everyone will forget in an hour. But Emily didn't feel like it was her day anymore. Her throat was tight, her smile brittle. Each time she forced out a laugh, she could feel her father's voice echo in her head. Your mom would have been proud. As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew awkward. Guests avoided the subject but couldn't stop talking about it. David's quiet exit became the evening's shadow, whispered between sips of champagne. Did you see that? One woman muttered. Her own father? Apparently he embarrassed them. I heard he's some kind of mechanic. Maybe he was drunk. No, he looked heartbroken. Emily caught fragments of the murmurs as she moved through the room, her fake smile faltering each time. Ryan seemed oblivious, or maybe he didn't care. He was busy laughing with his friends, bragging about their honeymoon in Bali. When she finally pulled him aside, her voice was low and shaky. Did we really have to do that? She asked. Do what? Ryan said, barely glancing up from his glass. Throw my dad out like that. Everyone saw? It's humiliating. Ryan sighed, his patience thinning. Emily, he humiliated us. He was standing there, interrupting the event, waving some old ring around in front of guests and press. My mother was mortified. You should be thanking me for keeping things under control. Emily blinked. That old ring belonged to my mom. He waved a dismissive hand. It's sentimental, sure. But this is a high-profile wedding, appearances matter. She stared at him for a long moment, realizing with a slow, cold clarity that Ryan wasn't embarrassed for her, he was embarrassed of her family, of where she came from, of who she really was. But before she could respond, one of the photographers called them over for a couple's photo. She plastered on a smile once more, but inside, her heart was heavy. Later that night, when the guests began to leave, Emily returned to the head table. The velvet box was still there. She picked it up slowly, her thumb brushing over its soft edges. For a moment she thought about opening it, about slipping her mother's ring onto her finger, just to feel that connection again, but then Ryan appeared beside her, his hand settling lightly on her back. Come on, he said. Time to go. The limo's waiting. She hesitated, then quietly slipped the box into her clutch. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp. The stars shimmered above the lake, the same stars that had watched her father drive away hours before. Emily glanced once toward the dark road, her chest aching in a way she couldn't name. The photographers called her name again, their flashes bursting like tiny explosions of light. She forced one last smile for the cameras, pretending she hadn't just thrown away something irreplaceable. And far down that same road, in a small quiet house, David sat alone in his kitchen, staring at an empty chair where his daughter should have been. He didn't hate her. He couldn't, but he knew something had broken that night, and he wasn't sure it could ever be mended. The day after the wedding, Emily awoke to the sound of waves crashing against the shore. For a moment, she thought everything was fine. The turquoise sea outside her balcony in Bali shimmered under the rising sun. The air was warm, fragrant with jasmine. It was the kind of place people dreamed of, a honeymoon in paradise. But when she turned over in bed, the illusion cracked. Ryan wasn't there. His suitcase was half unzipped, clothes scattered. His phone charger snaked across the floor. From the balcony she could hear his voice, sharp, impatient. Yeah. Just make sure the numbers are right this time, he was saying. I don't care if the supplier's late, we close the deal this week. Emily sat up, pulling the sheets around her. He was on a business call. On their honeymoon. When he finally hung up and came inside, she smiled hesitantly. Morning, she said softly. You've been up early. Ryan kissed her cheek distractedly. Yeah, sorry. Couldn't risk missing a call. My dad needs me on this deal, big one. You understand? She nodded, trying not to sound disappointed. Of course. Maybe after breakfast we could explore the beach? Sure, he said, already scrolling through emails. You go ahead, I'll catch up. So she went alone. The days passed like that. Every morning, Ryan had calls or meetings. Every afternoon, he was on his laptop by the pool. Every evening, he ordered the most expensive wine, bragged about his family's company, and reminded her how lucky she was to be part of the Bennetts now. At first, Emily told herself he was just stressed. Marriage was new. He'd calm down soon. But the more she tried to connect, the more distant he became. One evening, as they sat at a seaside restaurant, she finally brought it up. Ryan, can we just put the phones away for one night? Talk like we used to? He looked up from his screen, annoyed. This trip wasn't cheap. I can't just sit around drinking coconuts while deals fall apart. She frowned. It's our honeymoon. Exactly, he said, smirking. Which means you should be enjoying yourself, not nagging me. Her stomach twisted. I'm not nagging. I just want to spend time with my husband. He sighed dramatically, setting his phone down. Look, Emily, let's be honest. You married into a different world now. My family doesn't stop working. You wanted the fairy tale, fine, but that comes with expectations. You can't have the mansion and the charity galas if you're going to act. Small town. The words hit her like a slap. Small town? She repeated softly. He leaned back, swirling his wine. You know what I mean. You're sweet, You're kind, but sometimes you forget who you're married to. I'm the one who's going to give you everything you ever wanted. Just try not to make me look bad, okay?" Emily stared at him, her heart sinking deeper with every word. For the first time, she saw him clearly, his charm now hollow, his confidence nothing but arrogance dressed in designer clothes. She thought of her father, of the way he'd sat quietly in the back row, smiling even as she pushed him away, of the Lila he'd brought, her mother's favorite, of the ring she'd left behind on the table. A lump rose in her throat. She excused herself and went to the balcony, staring out at the waves. That night she barely slept. While Ryan snored beside her, she scrolled through the photos from the wedding. In every picture she looked beautiful, but not happy. She looked like someone pretending to be part of a story that didn't belong to her, and then she saw a photo she didn't know had been taken. Her father, standing at the edge of the venue, holding the bouquet of lilac just before being asked to leave. His eyes soft, proud, and full of love. Emily's heart broke. For the first time since the wedding, she cried. Not for the embarrassment, not for the gossip, but for what she had done to the only person who had ever loved her without condition. When morning came, she packed her things quietly. Ryan didn't notice until she zipped the suitcase. "Where are you going?" he asked grog-ily. She met his gaze, steady and cold. "Home, to see my father." Emily's flight home felt longer than the trip to Bali, even though it was half the distance. Every hour in the air gnawed at her conscience. She replayed the wedding in her mind, the look on her father's face when she told him to leave, the way he'd whispered, "Congratulations, sweetheart," like it still came from love. Not hurt. By the time the plane landed, she'd made up her mind. She wasn't going back to Ryan's penthouse. She wasn't calling anyone from his family. She was going to her father's house if he would even open the door. The taxi dropped her, off in front of the modest home she'd grown up in. The porch light still hung crooked, and the same creaky swing sat in the yard where she used to drink lemonade with her mom. The sight of it hit her like a wave. She stood there for a long minute before finally walking up the path and knocking. No answer. She knocked again, heart pounding. Then she tried the door. It was unlocked. Inside, everything was exactly as she remembered, the faint smell of coffee and oil, the hum of the old fridge, and pictures of her childhood still hanging slightly askew on the walls. Her throat tightened as she stepped farther in. "Dad?" she called softly. Silence. Then she heard faint clanking from the garage out back, the sound of metal tools and machinery. She followed it, pushing open the side door. The garage was packed with half-restored vintage cars, neatly arranged tool racks and blueprints pinned to the walls. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows, landing on a red '67 Mustang that gleamed like new. Her father's pride and joy. David stood beside it, wiping his hands on a rag. His hair was a little grayer, his back a little more bent. When he saw her, he froze. For a long, breathless moment, neither spoke. "Hey," Emily said quietly. I wasn't sure you'd be here." "I live here," he said simply, his voice calm but distant. "Didn't expect to see you, though. Shouldn't you be in paradise somewhere?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I came back early." He nodded, turning back to his workbench. "I see." "Dad," she whispered, stepping closer. "I'm sorry. About the wedding, about everything." David didn't look up. "You don't need to apologize. You made your choice. I didn't mean what I said. I was just embarrassed." He finished for her, setting down his wrench. His voice wasn't angry, just tired. "It's okay, Emily. I'm used to people being embarrassed by me." Her chest ached. "That's not fair." He gave a small, sad smile. "Life isn't, kiddo." She looked around, desperate to say something that would make it right. That's when she noticed the stacks of paperwork on his desk, folders labeled Carter Restoration Co. and Donations, Children's Hospital Fund. She picked one up, flipping through pages that listed financial reports, invoices, even thank you letters from charities. Her eyes widened. "Dad, what is all this?" He hesitated. "Just the shop's business records." She looked at him, realization dawning. "You own all this? You built a company?" He shrugged lightly. "Started small. Guess I got good at fixing things people thought were beyond repair. Old cars, mostly. Sometimes people, too. Her throat closed. Why didn't you ever tell me? David finally met her eyes, his expression softening. You never asked, Em. You were so busy trying to be part of their world. I figured my life wasn't something you wanted to hear about. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She looked around again, the photos of her mother on the wall. The old family calendar still pinned by the door. The small radio softly playing a song she used to dance to as a child. You're not just a mechanic, she whispered. You've done more good than all of them combined. He gave a quiet laugh. I'm just a man who works with his hands. That's all I ever needed to be. Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling. I don't deserve your forgiveness. David sighed, reaching into his pocket. When he pulled his hand out, he was holding the velvet box, the same one he'd left behind at the wedding. You left this on the table, he said softly. Thought maybe you'd want it after all. Emily took it with shaking hands, opening it slowly. The diamond sparkled in the sunlight, simple and pure. She looked up, tears streaming freely now. I threw away the only thing that ever mattered, didn't I? David stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. No, sweetheart. You just lost sight of it for a while. And for the first time in years, Emily fell into her father's arms and let herself cry, not from guilt alone, but from the unbearable relief of being home.